So Kimberly, how you been?
I'm awesome. How are you, friend?
Good, I'm doing really well. So how's school going?
It's good. So I'm still in a hybrid role, a little bit different this time around, but I'm still teaching virtually. So Louisiana, we started back at the very beginning of August. So I know that, East Coast where you are, there's a lot of schools that are just starting now, but we're
One
like
week.
way
I'm
next.
I'm only one weekend. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's like a lifetime.
yeah.
Well,
Well, that's good. Yeah. I've never. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you. I've just never experienced anything like this. It's a whole new. I thought I knew teacher tired. This is a whole new level of teacher tired.
yeah, and it's crazy. I only have one prep with two like classes in it, and it doesn't matter. I mean,
Right.
the time that it takes, and I'm not even gonna lie, like I've now like prepped four different ways and we've only been in school like a little over a month. And like so each time flopped. So I think that's, we're all novice teachers again, no matter how skilled we were.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different skill set. And a whole different set of challenges, but yeah, I'm really happy that I'm with my kids again, even if it's virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you that are just joining, I'm talking with Kimberly Eckert, who is not only the Louisiana Teacher of the Year 2018, not only a top 50 finalist for the Global Teacher Prize, but also authored an amazing chapter in Flip the System US, How Teachers Can Transform Education and Save Democracy. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can solve the teacher crisis, the teacher shortage, and how we can diversify the teaching profession, which you addressed both of those things in your chapter. And I've said this in some of the other interviews before, but what we put together and what we wrote was important before, but seems to be even more critically important after the pandemic, after the Black Lives Matter movement, after the inequities that have been exposed by those things in our society. And so, have you kind of had that same thought after you wrote the chapter?
Oh my gosh, yes. Because I mean, and if you look at really all of the chapters, it's sort of prophetic for what's now. And I think it's because, our world hasn't changed and teachers teach to the world that they live in. And I think that problems were exacerbated and definitely brought to the surface, but not a single problem is brand new, I guess, except, global pandemic and the technological age. But I was thinking about that too, about how like there's just not even a word that I would change in terms of the chapter that I wrote, and just looking at everything else that was included, it's all so timely still.
Yeah. So you start off the chapter with this incredible narrative after you were announced as Teacher of the Year when you met your students. So why don't you share a little piece of that with those who are watching, because I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. So and I have to start off like I want you to know like I really love my students and they really like me too. I'm gonna put okay.
Well, how could they not? I mean, anyone watching, your enthusiasm for teaching is like coming through this. We've been talking for like 5 minutes now. It's just oozing through the screen. So there's no doubt of that.
Disclaimer: my students and I, we really like each other a lot. But whenever I won Teacher of the Year for Louisiana, and they were incredibly proud of us. Like they were so proud of our class. And in Louisiana, there's an organization called Dream Teachers that allocates like lots of prizes and things. And one of them is the Teacher of the Year gets to drive a Mercedes for the year. Really nice Mercedes SUV. So of course, like the first place I went whenever I was driving my SUV, which I did not feel like I should be driving to begin with from my like 2001 Kia, I went to like a coffee shop where a lot of my students work or kind of hang out. And like I rolled in, I'm blowing the horn, and like they were like, "Miss E, they gave you a Mercedes for teaching?" And like, oh my gosh. And the thing is, my students love me and they know that I'm a good teacher and they were proud of me for winning, but there was such a disconnect that a teacher would be given something that they equate with status, with wealth, with prestige. It just like in that moment, it just kind of showed me everything about basically the image of teachers in the eyes of our young people. So that's the story in a nutshell. And it really has stuck with me ever since then, because I realized the problem wasn't the Mercedes. The problem wasn't that a teacher was driving it. The problem was so much to do with perception, and that we've got a lot of work to do to turn around what people think of when they view teachers.
Yeah, and so you write about in your chapter, and I know since that time, in the past 2 or 3 years, you have really focused on recruiting the next generation of teachers, right? Of making sure that we're getting the right people in the profession. And I was actually, not just because we were going to be speaking today, but I was actually thinking about you in this context today, as I was looking at Pennsylvania and some of the issues with school districts who don't necessarily have teachers in the room making decisions during this time of pandemic, and it's leading to all kinds of what should be avoidable unintended consequences, right? There's mistakes being made because teachers aren't in the room. And part of it, I think, is this perception that teachers are subservient, right? That we should be doing what we're told rather than leading. Part of it is that we're not recruiting leadership into the profession, right? We're not looking for that skill set when we're choosing people to teach. And all of those things are things that you're focused on in your Grow Your Own program. So talk a little about the work that you've been doing for the past 2 or 3 years.
Wow. Yeah, all those things. So I think I'm going to backtrack, and every time I talk about this, I go a little bit of a different direction. But I think about the things, because when we look at the cracks in the teacher pipeline, we're also bleeding teachers. So we already have a crisis that we're not attracting enough new talent, but we're losing the talent that we've got. And we know that there's some pretty blaring, very stark numbers, about half our profession in the first few years. Oh my gosh. And I just think, what would that be like if the military turned over and had to retrain in the first 3 years, right? So we've got some issues. And so whenever I was taking a look at Louisiana and our Grow Your Own programs and trying to look at what had gone wrong in the past, or where had Grow Your Own programs failed to really diversify the profession, because they're not new, I knew that I had sort of one shot to be able to recruit these high school students and to avoid some of the reasons why we lose teachers later on. And this is just kind of interesting. This isn't in the chapter. It's a new idea because I'm not a one-trick pony.
So it's for the next book that you're writing.
I know. But I was listening to this video that this Dr. Z on YouTube was recommended to me, and he talks about like burnout in the medical profession, and he kind of rails against it, and he's like, stop calling it burnout. There's nothing, like, people aren't burning out in these really high need demanding professions. He calls it moral injury. So I think about the fact that whenever teachers are like sort of in the swing, they're already learning a very difficult skill, a really difficult profession, and then they feel like there are system and structures that they can't change, that they're powerless over. That causes the burnout. No teacher gets burned out because of children. No teacher gets burned out because of their classrooms. So I think about that too. So whenever we're looking to recruit the next generation of teachers, what if we not only recruited a really, really specific type of leader, a future educational leader, but we also empowered them with their own voice, where they're not feeling like they're victimized by a profession, where they start owning their own narrative and they start having agency and the ability to advocate for what's needed and what they see. And I just think that with this generation, I already knew this, like all research points to Gen Z, like they're just the ones, right? And we have seen that in full force over this past summer. But whenever we started to lay this groundwork out in Louisiana, we actually looked to market research, and it showed us the exact same things, that this generation, they want to take charge, they want to lead. And I just think what a beautiful thing for the teaching profession, where we've got this generational evolution happening right now, and how desperately we need these voices that are powerhouses from the start.
Yeah, it's you bring up that Gen Z research, and in the previous book that I had wrote, Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, I had dug pretty deeply into that Gen Z research. So I was familiar with a lot of that. And I was also doing this advocacy work in education and pushing for a flipped system even before the book, named it that.
Yeah, you were.
But you're the first person that really connected those two things for me. And I remember reading, editing your chapter and coming across that and being like, wow, I don't believe I didn't make that connection before, that here, this generation is telling us that they want to do social good, that they want to be involved, that their career choice, they want to be involved in things where they're making the world better, right? And here we are as teachers offering that, and nobody other than Kimberly Eckert down in Louisiana that I know, right? Nobody is putting those things together and saying, why aren't we using that as a recruiting tool? And you write about that so beautifully in the chapter.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, and we've actually seen spikes in schools of social work and things like that, these nitty gritty helping professions from this generation. But just like my students that didn't think I should get a Mercedes for teaching, right? we've got to do a better job of showing them that teaching is like the most powerful segue for real global change, for impact, for everything they're looking for. They can find it right here if they are willing to work hard, and if they understand from the start that it is a very demanding, very challenging profession. And one of the first things that I tell like high school students whenever they take a look and they finally start to understand the skill set that goes into teaching, the thing is, it's a profession. It's a profession, and you work at it your whole entire life. But the thing is, we don't have 8 years to train like other professions, right? With similar impact. Our clientele is nonstop. And so like basically from the time someone's 22 years old, they have the weight of the world right there in front of their classroom. And that could be really heavy. And we know that it takes years to be a great teacher. So it just makes sense that we start them a lot sooner on that journey by making that journey really transparent.
Yeah, you mentioned something in the beginning of your answer there. You said that we need them to know that education is both challenging and demanding. And I think anyone who has been in a classroom understands that pretty well. But one of the things that I've seen, and I'm going to try and connect this and see if it works, and you can totally shoot me down on this. But one of the things that I've seen is when as teacher of the year, we spend a lot of time talking with pre-service teachers, right? And I mean, you do it in your, even pre-service teachers, like, even before they get into college. But when I talk to those college students, they have this incredible optimism to them, right? They're so excited to teach. They chose the profession for all the right reasons, just like we did when we went in. And there's this incredible disconnect between that and between your teacher who's in 7 or 8 years, right? So you ask that pre-service teacher, why do you want to teach? And they say, I want to change the world. I want to help kids like be amazing. I want to help them shape their future. And then you ask that, that teacher that's been in 7, 8, 15, 20, whatever years, like, what are you doing in school this week? And they never answer, like, I'm helping kids be amazing. I'm helping kids be successful in their future. They're like, we're preparing for this unit test on Friday, right? Or, those state tests are coming down on us, right? There's this disconnect. And I think because teachers in the profession, and this is a systemic problem, right? And we address it in the book and other chapters, but because they have forgotten their purpose, it's really hard for them to sell teaching to the next generation, right? And they're in front of high school kids, but your program flips that around because you write about how you go and you can actively identify kids in your school who like, this kid is going to be an amazing teacher. We need to get him in, right? So talk about that, because I don't know too many other people that are really looking at that model right now, where they're like snatching kids and trying to get them into the teaching profession.
It's so true. Like they really are snatched. Like, oh no, I was not in this class. And then the next day I was. And you bring out a couple of different things, and I think it definitely needs to be noted. And it goes back to the feelings of teachers after many, many years, if they haven't found a way to keep that fire alive. PDK released a poll in 2019 that now like 54% of teachers discourage students from becoming teachers. Mm-hmm. That's major. That's telling us a huge deal about our profession. But whenever it comes to kind of selecting these students, I think of all the things, like basically all the dispositions and all the traits that I think can be worked at and taught, but we also have people who have them like already. So I think about the things that make great teachers great, because you already have to learn a million things about content and the way things work and about people and human beings. But then I look at these students that already have like a growth mindset in terms of like, they know that life's a never ending journey of learning. Like they're really curious. The ones that are really great bridge builders, like they're not looking for division. They're always kind of like unifying. They're the harmony. They make people feel better about themselves. They're great leaders. They're charismatic. Like people follow them. They're natural leaders. Those that are great problem solvers, that are really creative, really curious, like all those things great teachers are. They're all those things, right? And we see students on our campus every single day that have those dispositions and those traits. And the first thing that we would tell them is don't be a teacher, don't waste your talent. And I know that. I was told that.
right. Same here, right? I was like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I came to teach in the long way. So this is not a new problem. We know that this has happened generationally, and like there's just such a disconnect with what we think teachers are, but what we know we need them to be. And so the students that have these skills, we've got to stop destroying our future from where it starts, and we funnel them to every other profession but our own. And so I think it starts back with kind of taking the narrative back and understanding we need the best for this job, and then other professions can get all the rest.
But before we go on, I'm very familiar with your program, so I understand like when you're snatching them, what you're snatching them into. But I think for those that are watching who may not be familiar, can you do just like a 60-second rundown of what the what your program looks like, what the Educators Rising program looks like?
So the Educators Rising program, if you actually have heard of Future Educators of America, like Future Teachers of America, it's the same organization, but it's sort of in a new reincarnation. And I believe that as long as we keep losing people in seats for colleges of education, it'll continue to rebrand, which I think is very powerful. So basically, it's recruiting kids for the 21st century classroom, not one from days of yore. And so what that means is students with an open eye towards equity, social justice, with an asset-based perspective, that really understand the challenges, that are really honest with themselves about the workforce and where we need them. And I think it's that honesty that really appeals to them, so that they're not shocked day one on the job, that they trained really hard to teach elementary students in the suburbs, that they're actually going to be teaching middle school science in an inner city school. That shouldn't come as a shock. That should come as like an honor that you get to do that work and you've been prepared for that work. So that probably was more than 60 seconds. And if
that's great.
Again, I'd say it a different way.
Yeah. So you mentioned social justice and the need for that in the profession. I think you and I see eye to eye on that. But when I take a broader look at a flipped education system, right, and what we're pushing for, we're really saying we need teacher expertise, the collective expertise of teachers to drive the education system in order for there not to be those unintended consequences, in order for education to have a flattened hierarchy, for kids to succeed, for teachers to be empowered, right? But one of the big problems with that model is that if the teaching force does not represent or reflect the kids who are in our classrooms, then that leads to a whole nother set of unintended consequences. We have teachers making decisions, but they don't have the perspective that they need to be able to represent our kids. And I know that you struggle with this in your chapter, and I love that, because in the book we really embrace nuance, we really embrace complexity, and you can see it towards the end of your chapter where you're struggling to say, like, I know that this grow your own model can be a solution, but I'm not seeing that borne out in research because some of the other models don't look like mine, right? Yeah. So talk a little bit about what your vision for how this can be part of the solution is.
Yes, well, and it sounds like you're talking about like our need to be committed to diversifying our teacher pipeline in every possible way that reflects the beautiful diversity of our country and our world. That is, we know that's beneficial. There's research about the effects. What there's not, and what's sort of been lacking in grow your own programs, especially in Louisiana, and I'm certain that trend would be pretty common throughout the country, is that grow your own programs have actually not done a good job of diversity. They've actually shored up sort of like the lack of access, there's no diversity, and that's been a huge problem. And you take a look at why, and that's something that I definitely had to dismantle within the state, and I had to start with attention to that from the beginning. Whenever I looked at who would be able to have access to these courses, a lot of times they're treated as dual enrollment, or they're treated as AP or sort of honors, like this elite pathway. So that immediately took access away from students from different backgrounds, or students of color, quite honestly. If I look around and even at the school that I teach at, there are very few students of color in honors classes, for whatever the reason might be. But I knew that I was going to perpetuate the exact pipeline that we've got if I didn't turn attention to that. So with all the different plates that we're spinning, I also went straight to start to develop a pathway and options for dual credit, ways that credit for this class can be chosen in a different way. And then an also really damaging thing is because we tend to track students so early into who's going to college and who's not, we were losing a lot of students of color that way. Really, really promising people with all of those traits that I already said, but they had already been told, you're not college material. They were made to feel that, and they certainly don't see themselves reflected in their school, that even that teaching's for them at all. So that was something that we had to turn attention to. In Louisiana, there's really been a resounding commitment to that. And making sure that there's access. If you are a great fit for this class, there is an in-way into it. But if a state doesn't do that intentionally, then it's not going to happen on its own. It's going to be left to a very specific type usually white, cisgendered, Christian, medium, socioeconomic female. And that's great, but we need everybody, right?
Yep.
And we can't diversify something if we're not intentional about tearing down the barriers that keep people out.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome answer. You mentioned two things there. One of them, I just want to reflect and say I love this part of your answer just because it's something that I'm passionate about. It's one of the chapters I wrote in Teaching the Fourth Industrial Revolution is how education can be used both to overcome inequity in our system and also, in a broader sense. I mean, I know both of us have that global focus that we push for in our classroom. But in that chapter, I talk about how we use data and how a sole focus on quantitative data perpetuates inequity. And what you talked in that you mentioned it right off the beginning, you were like, we saw these data and they were bearing out this result, but no one had ever asked why before, right? And so you're getting to that qualitative data and saying, okay, tell me your lived experience, tell me why this is happening to you so that we can make it better, right? And the fact that you've built your program off that, I personally love that. I just love that aspect of using that qualitative data. But you also talked about intentionality. And making sure that you're using it for the right focus and then being intentional about closing those equity gaps in the profession. And I wonder, how has that changed over the 3 years that you've been doing this work? So like I guess what I'm asking is it's all part of the design process, right? Like we fail and then we learn and we make it better and so how has that looked in the past couple of years as you tried to do this work?
Well, I've definitely gotten a lot ballsier. And I say this all the time. I'm pretty timid, in my life, but not whenever it comes to education and kids. So I started taking no for an answer, never. And because I was also trying to raise the prestige of this program and raise the prestige of our profession, I'm able to make really rigid demands. Well, maybe this isn't a good fit for you in your school if you can't talk about diversity and you can't approach a student of color and tell them all the value that they're going to bring to the profession. If you can't have those conversations, let me work with you there. Mm-hmm. So I've been super intentional about calling people into conversations because there's no other way to do it. This whole program and its success hinges on our ability to be able to speak frankly and lead uncomfortable conversations, not just have them, but lead them. And in situations and in communities where I'm in Jim Crow South, right? This is South Louisiana, having conversations that need to be had whenever we talk about race, whenever we talk about religion, whenever we talk about poverty, whenever we talk about these gaps, we can't, we know solutions, but they're hard. And if you can't from the start these programs understanding that that's the end game and you've got to talk about it and you can't blame something else and you can't pretend that spades aren't spades, then you can't have this program. Yeah. Because we don't want to perpetuate what we're trying to clean up right now. There's just so many different issues and we know the answers, they're just hard. But teachers can do hard things. And no one's rejected the program. No one has. So that's been really great. Not watering it down, but giving people power and strength to say, yes, but you can be a part of this amazing solution. Thank you so much. It's been really great. No one's refused yet.
I love the way, and I know that there's only a handful of people who have read the entire book and know all of the chapters. And I can't wait for it to come out because I want people to see these intersections that I'm seeing now. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about how well your chapter meshes with Josh Parker's, right? Who talks on a broader level about how we, what does a system that produces equitable outcomes look like? What are the characteristics of that system? How do we build that system, right? And what you're talking about at more of a micro level meshes so well with him taking that macro level view. I think it's going to be awesome for readers to see that. But we talked about the pandemic in the beginning of our conversation. And now you said you're teaching virtually now. I know that there's all kinds of different pedagogical models, right? And so part of your program is letting future teachers in high school experience a little bit of what teaching might be like, right? Lesson planning and doing those kinds of things. How has that changed now that what we're doing as teachers is totally different than what we were doing 8 months ago?
Well, I'm glad you asked because here's what's so cool. Whenever schools shut down physically here in Louisiana, so March 13th, basically on March 16th, the Students and Educators Rising, they didn't miss a beat. They continued learning because we were able to look at what was difficult. We had just had this amazing unit about like tying in our equity unit to like looking at coronavirus and what are schools taking in consideration? What if schools shut down? Why are they not making these decisions? Who does it affect? Like having these children have conversations about school hunger, mental health, like all the things that would have to go into these really weighty decisions, and talking about them with such precision. It was such a testament to the fact that even if students don't become a teacher, whenever they go through this course, they're going to be so passionate about public education and such informed voters and informed citizens. And they're going to be able to articulate maybe why teaching's not for them in a better way. And then since then, it's all about pulling the curtain back. So being very transparent, even now that I've had to redo the course several times, like telling them why, or that this didn't work, or students owning, like, yeah, I didn't have internet access. I couldn't be in the class either. Miss Eckert had to come to my house and give, like, whatever it is. And so I think that's the thing that it hinges on our recognition of things that are difficult and troubleshooting and problem solving. How would we work around that? So I can't wait to see these young people in a classroom, and because they are approaching it not out of fear, but like, let's pull our sleeves up. Yeah, that sucks. What are we going to do about that? What could a teacher do? And what I've seen just come out of the students in the classroom since then has been really, really amazing.
And in that answer, you really touched on one of the major themes in the book, which I think, you know, if we do this, not just in these Educators Rising like education courses, but if we focus education on exactly what you said, pulling back the curtain, having nuanced, complex conversations, allowing students to think critically about important issues that are really affecting people in society, if we make school about that, rather than standardized testing or whatever, like that's how we build future citizens, right? That's how we build a citizenry that is prepared to lead our democracy, which is awesome. So we're almost out of time, Kimberly, but this has been awesome. Like I just love catching up, right? Even if we weren't talking about the book, just being able to see you and talk to you is great. So tell me, going forward in the next couple of years, how has this work of like putting this chapter together and some of the other spaces that you've been in the past couple of years, these leadership roles, how has that shaped you, and where do you see this Educators Rising teacher recruitment? Where do you see this going in the next 5-10 years?
It's so crazy. I only solve a problem that's in front of me, and other things happen, and I don't know how to do it any other way. What I hope to see, like the nerd in me and the person, like the strategist in me who set out to do this, I want to see it work. And I don't have the answer. We don't have enough data. We just don't. But I know we can't wait. We can't wait to collect it. Like we're already 5 years too late, or maybe an eternity too late. So what's interesting now, actually in my hybrid role, I work for the Department of Education as of like 2 months ago. And we're now folding the work under our aspiring educator division and like connecting some work there. There's some really powerful spaces within the department that are embracing that. We're doing some work with para-educators and really like reaching out and branching access to everybody, even if they're not a high school student. So I need that to continue, and I want it to be sustainable. And so everything that I have like learned, I'm teaching that to teacher leaders, because I don't need the work to stop whenever like I'm not here anymore and I've got new problems to solve, right? So I think that there's a testament to that too, that empowering people so that there's no one keeper of all the information, because everybody has what it takes to flip their own system and to find problems and to make solutions and to bring other people into those solutions.
Well, there you have it, everyone. I mean, Kimberly Eckert, chapter author in Flip the System US, How Teachers Can Transform Education and Save Democracy. To learn more about the book, to get your copy, and see other videos of amazing chapter authors like Kimberly, you can find them all at flipthesystem.us. Kimberly, what an awesome pleasure to be able to catch up with you after school, after a Monday where I'm like, you know, struggling to keep my head above water, to be able to come home and have this conversation. Like, you made my day. It's awesome.
Yay.